What's up, guys? Welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today, we read 1 Kings chapter 15, so let's get into it.
Okay, so 1 Kings chapter number 15 begins almost a parade of kings throughout the book of Kings. So this is why it's called that, because this is a series of kings. Now, what I want you to kind of remember as you go through here, I want you to remember the word dynasty. All right, feel like there was an old TV show named Dynasty.
Duck Dynasty?
No, not Duck Dynasty. It's something else. I don't know. I think my mama may watch it. Anyway, dynasty, okay? A dynasty is when one king dies, another king takes his spot because that's his son. And it's passed down from father to son, from father to son. Now listen, security in a nation is usually determined by how long that dynasty exists. When dynasties are chopped up, and so there's one that lasts maybe one generation or two, and then another, and then another, and another. That means that there's a lot of political problems going on in that, and there's a lot of trouble. You're starting to see this because what you'll see in this is that over the books of the Kings, the northern kingdom of Israel. Remember, Rehoboam, which was Solomon's son. While he was king, the nation split. So the northern country was called Israel. They took the big name because they took most of the tribes. They went north, or they had the northern area. The southern area that we would think of as like Bethlehem and Jerusalem, things like that. That was in the lower part, the southern part of the region. That was called Judah. Now, the northern kingdom had 9 dynasties over 250 years. That's a lot of different families who were vying to be king over the Israel. But now listen, the southern kingdom, they had one dynasty, the line of King David, and that existed for 350 years. Now here's where it starts. You go, well, that's because they were good. No. Because when chapter 15 opens, it says, in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijam became king over Judah. And he reigned 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the granddaughter of Abishalom. And he walked in all the sins of his father, which his father had done before him. So listen to this. Just because he had David's blood in him did not mean he had David's heart. Now here's where God is gracious. God is gracious in that God could have squashed Abijam like a bug, but he didn't. He instead chose to let him continue to be king because of his faithful love and promises to David. And remember, what is the instrumental promise to David? That someday somebody from the throne of David is going to sit on the throne of Israel forever. What line of people did the Messiah come from? The line of David. This is why God has done this. God puts up with a lot because through the family of David, there's gonna be a Messiah born, and it's gonna be Jesus. Now, let's jump ahead to Asa. That was where your takeaway was. Go.
Okay, so yeah, we've heard about a lot of kings lately, and Asa it feels like he's the first in many who's actually good and faithful. And so we see this when it talks about him exiling all the bad people, but he, because of his righteousness to God, he also had to make hard decisions. Like he had to exile his own grandma, which was pretty difficult.
Well, she was a wicked woman,
right? But I mean, that's his freaking grandma. But
yeah, mama, sitting on down the road.
Okay. But we also can infer that he was rewarded by God because of this, because through this chapter we see they reigned for like 3 years, 5 years, pretty short times. But it says that King Asa ruled over Israel for 41 years, which is pretty ridiculous compared to everyone else. And also, verse 23, it just sums up the rest of King Asa's life. He said, the rest of all the events of Asa's reign, along with all his might, his accomplishments, and the cities he built, were written in the historical records of Judah's kings. And so for him to have enough of those to be mentioned and written about in the historical record is a big deal, because obviously he had to have had a lot of it. So he was rewarded by God because of this righteousness.
That's right. So whereas you see the northern kingdom rotating through kings pretty quick, the line of David stays. Well, Asa is he's one of Israel's longest lasting kings. As a matter of fact, both David and Solomon ruled for about 40 years. Asa ruled for 41 years. So he ruled for 1 year longer than both of those guys. What I think is interesting about him is he's got his good and his bad, like all of us. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so the good side of him was he goes in and he bulldozes all of these pagan sites and he removes all these idol worshiping places. And he really does physically what we ought to be doing spiritually. Find areas where we are tempted to worship idols and remove them out of our lives. The other thing that happens though is we see that he does struggle with faith. So he gathers up all of the riches of the temple and he gives them away to another country in order to kind of buy basically a treaty with mercenaries to kind of help him as he fights the northern kingdom of Israel. Why do you have to trust in and pay for soldiers from another country when he could have just trusted in God? The problem is that even the king struggled knowing that we ought to let nothing make us fearful. See, Joshua had to be reminded over and over again, do not be afraid. Well, Asa was afraid, but it doesn't sound like he had many people around him that remembered the old lessons of God that says, hey, we're not supposed to be fearful here. And listen, I think that probably what we've all got is a need for godly people around us, a need to make godly decisions, and a need to make godly decisions that are even difficult and maybe sometimes unpopular. Because that's what Asa did. Now, the other side of this is, and we get into Nadab by the end of this. By the way, that's Jeroboam's son, Nadab, who is then assassinated so that a guy named Baasha can take it. I mean, it's an ugly scene, and it just gets worse and worse. But I want you to go through the rest of this. Go toward the end of this chapter and circle how many times you see the word fathers. So, like for instance, in verse 24, so Asa rested with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, his father. Then Jehoshaphat, his son, reigned in his place. There's a lot of connection here between the role of the father and the son. And what's interesting is, to me, how very important legacies are. How we have to be careful what we pass down intentionally and even unintentionally. That the people around us that we have influenced, and sometimes it's easy for me to see that because I have sons. It's harder for sons to see that who don't have sons, but in reality, all of us have people in our lives that watch us. And some may watch us because we're influences over, and they respect us. Others watch because they want to see you mess up because they don't really like you. But here's the deal: everybody's watching. And so you got to be very careful with what you pass down, because every king that will come through here will be measured based on the influences of the kings that came before them, and then they will become the influences for the kings that come after them. So this is a chapter about dynasty, legacy, and what you pass down. So be careful what you pass down, and keep reading on. And we're going to see you Sunday morning. We're going to open our Bibles, and we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter number 11. So we'll see you on Sunday. Bye.